Welcome to the Life Podcast, where we help you learn cybersecurity best practices, give you a weekly update on the latest cybersecurity news, and share valuable career advice. Hi everyone, it's Ken. In this episode, you're going to hear from Charles Payne, and we'll be talking about the CISO role or CISO role, depending on who you ask, in cybersecurity. Now, Charles is a CISO at Neptune Media. He's got over 25 years of IT and cybersecurity experience. He's also involved in the Horizon Summit, which is a cybersecurity conference that actually takes place in Hawaii, of all awesome places. And you're going to learn more information about the conference in this episode, and then also you'll learn how to sign up for the conference. They have a virtual option. You'll find all that information in the description of this episode. As with all of our guests, anything that Charles shares in this episode is his personal opinion, and it does not reflect the opinion of his employer or any other organization that he's affiliated with. So without further ado, let's jump right in and learn from Charles. Thanks for coming on today, Charles. So I just want to dive right in. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about CISO, so the CISO role. So there may be some audience members out there that don't even know, like, what is CISO, or some people call it CISO. There's a variety of ways to pronounce it. So do you mind just talking about that particular role and why it's important to have at most organizations? Smaller companies may not have it. They may have a different type of role, but for the majority of kind of larger companies, just talk about what is a CISO and why it's important.
Yeah, so a CISO role, Chief Information Security Officer, is important in terms of compliance. So basically, we handle all of the governance, risk, and compliance aspects of an organization. So typically, larger organizations have us in place to protect data. So essentially what we are, in a nutshell, is we're the keepers of data. That is our predominant role in an organization, is to protect the data, secure the data, and make sure the data doesn't get leaked or breached.
Let's talk a bit about your personal journey to getting into that role. So when you reflect back on your journey, across your career, what are some of the key experiences or the skills that you feel were beneficial that helped you transition into the senior leadership role once you got to that point?
Right. So my background is rather colorful. I started in finance, and then I wound up in IT, and then I went back to finance, and then it turns out that I learned how to communicate with people in terms of dollars and cents. So I'm very technical, but at the same token, I'm very business oriented, and that's what made it easy for me to transition, because I had a background in finance to begin with. I could translate things into dollars and cents, whereas I'm not trying to hit somebody over the head with technical jargon, what's this, what's that, and acronyms. I'll be the first person to tell you, even though I might be in a CISO role or CTO role, I don't know half the acronyms because they seem to change. The only one that I can clearly ever remember is one that you, David, and Alan Alfred would talk about for being like FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, the thing that Mike Johnson always would say on the podcasts. Aside from that, the other acronyms, I honestly don't remember them. And I'm sitting there and when I hear them, I'm like, I wonder which one they're talking about, because there's so many things that overlap and duplicate. I'm like, I just get lost.
Yeah, and we like to create new ones just so marketers have something else to put in their blog post to sell us the shiny box of magic that will solve all of our cybersecurity challenges.
That was actually something that they told me. Gartner will invent something for if you don't have it in your information or your stack today. Don't worry, Gartner will invent some type of acronym, so you will buy something new. Yes,
that's the way it works, man. So the path to getting to that level, it is challenging for a lot of people. It's a journey. I think some people think they'll work for 2 years and then go into that role, and that's just not realistic. But for individuals that are maybe at the point of experience in their careers where they're looking for that next step, they're looking to move into a CTO, CISO role, CIO, any type of senior leadership role. What what advice would you have for that individual that's looking to make that jump from maybe mid-level management into a more senior role?
So the biggest piece of advice I can give anybody that's looking to make that jump: one, know what you're asking for, because initially you won't understand what it's like, and you might say, I've got a great home life balance. Well, don't think that's going to be the case when you jump into that role. Just saying it right now, the work life balance is off. But aside from that, and that's initially, eventually it balances out. But initially, you might be working 5 or 7 days straight. You might be like, hey, well, I don't ever get a day off. Welcome to the world. Welcome to the world of cybersecurity. So that's one thing that's very important to know. don't focus on the money. Don't focus on what you think the perks are. The perks are there because some of the sacrifices we make is a lot more than everybody else makes, and they just don't see it. So once you understand that and you understand what those goals and objectives are personally, the biggest piece of advice that I can give anybody, even going into a CISO role or CTO or CIO role today, would be to understand how the business operates. What are the business goals? So this is actually going back to a conversation I had with Alan and somebody else about a BISO role. So where they're focused on business information security. They're a business information security officer. So if you can handle like a BISO role, then being able to do the CISO role, the chief information security officer, is a lot easier because now you understand how to communicate to the business. You understand what the business deliverables are, and you understand what the business actually needs to function and survive. Because in a CISO role, you focus on what's happening on the corporation, but you're not looking directly internally at the business. You're looking more of like an outward facing needs. So that's where I would advise. So if you're in the middle management level roles, like a BISO or maybe a head of security or whatnot, it's important to understand who your internal stakeholders are as a BISO or what the BISO role might entail, but then also to be able to focus that and incorporate that when you're doing your CISO role. So that would be the biggest piece of advice I can give, is to make sure that you understand all the different aspects of your business so you can communicate to all of your stakeholders effectively. And then that will make it an easy transition for you when it's time to take over that role, because now you can already communicate to the board, to your peers, to your people that you're responsible for, your stakeholders, as well as everybody else.
So the role itself, it's pretty multidimensional. I mean, you've got to have some kind of technical expertise. You don't necessarily need to be the world's greatest hacker or anything like that. You got to have leadership skills. As you mentioned, you've got to be able to communicate in the language of the business, kind of have that strategic mindset. So when you're thinking about someone out there that's maybe looking to move into this role, what are some of like those key qualities that you think would make kind of that perfect candidate? Like if you were interviewing someone to replace your role, like what in your mind would be some of those key qualities or competencies or experiences that they would need to have to be successful in the role?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've actually trained my replacements before at my past organizations. Actually, I work in an investment group, so we actually hire CISOs for our companies that we have. So that is actually part of what I do. And normally what I do is I look for someone who's somewhat technical, but I don't expect them to be a genius, but I want them to know what DFIR stands for, what incident response is. Because at the end of the day, we're responsible for incidents in such an environment. I don't expect them necessarily to be able to be the ones hands on keyboard to fix it, but I need them to be able to speak the same language as their team so they can understand what's going on in a real time scenario. So that's always very critical for me. But more so than just being technical, and again, the technical aspect of it is just the base understandings of the terminologies and the stuff that we use in the field. So just the base understanding and the cursory definitions of what we're doing. But more so, I focus on people who are business savvy and who have the ability to motivate people. So when you say leadership, what you're really talking about is someone who has the ability to motivate one person to do something else that they may or may not want to do naturally. So that's how I define leadership. It's being able to motivate others and to unite to a single form and to a single course of action. And that's what I look for in a leader. That's what I look for in a CISO, someone who's able to motivate others, who's able to drive change by motivating and basically being conversational. So I look for someone who's got a lot of skills. But in addition to everything that we just mentioned, I also look for someone to have some type of background in finance. And again, not financial services or anything, but to understand that everything has to be communicated, at least on our level, in terms of dollars and cents. Because if you say, hey, I want to buy this new shiny widget and it costs $1 million, the first thing I'm going to ask you is, what does this $1 million widget do? And if you say it does this FUD thing, this fear, uncertainty, and doubt thing, I'm like, okay, cool. Translate for me this fear, uncertainty, and doubt. What's this vulnerability really do when it doesn't exist in our environment? Why do I need this? So I need you to explain to me what's the risk that you're trying to solve for, and why is it important in our environment in terms of dollars and cents? If we don't fix the risk, do I lose all of my money? Do I lose all of our company's money? Does it affect our employees? Does it affect our customers? Does it affect our other shareholders? How does it work? So I need someone to be able to quantify and clarify when they say that they want to buy something. We're very liberal in what we spend money on. And I know the market's sitting here saying that cybersecurity people aren't spending money. It's actually quite the opposite. We actually spend a lot of money. The flip side is we've just gotten a lot smarter. So we don't buy all those new shiny things anymore. So if you're new and you're trying to sell me this brand new widget, my first question is, why do I want this widget? And if you can't tell me why I want this widget, I'm not going to buy it. So it's not like we've stopped spending money. Everyone's saying that, oh, this, we're not spending money in cybersecurity, it's going down, market's so no. Market's perfectly great. Market's been steady for years. What's actually changing is we're getting smarter. We're realizing that everybody's lying to us. And again, I say everybody is a generalization, but not I don't really literally mean everybody. But the problem being is that we're not buying the newest shiny thing anymore. We've gotten smarter that we're realizing that fear, uncertainty, and doubt, this FUD is causing us to make impulsive decisions that is harming us and our own reputations as a CISO or senior management. So that would be what I would say of how someone to do, or someone could actually replace my job. And again, just to summarize, focus on business acumen, focus on dollars and cents, why we want to buy something, why we want to do something, and then have some type of base technical skills to actually clarify why we're doing it. Everything goes hand in hand, but that's essentially how I would define a leader and how I define my replacement.
So what strategies do you actually employ to help stay ahead of like emerging risks out there?
In order to stay ahead of emerging risks, there's always the straight answer, and there's always the one that's a little bit skewed. The straight answer is I always do my due diligence and my research. I always try to stay current as to what the threats are. But the truth of the matter is, that's the compliance answer, right? So the truth of the matter is, I talk to peers, I talk to my friends, I talk to people who are in a similar industry that I am, and even ones that aren't, and we talk about what's going on in our environments and our situations and what we're seeing, and we have those candid conversations, typically in person, about what we really see, what we really see happen. It's great to have like an ISAC or InfoGuard and stuff like that, but I know that we're late giving them the data, they're late publishing it, and it's usually one of these cyclical cycles where by the time that I get the IOCs and the TTPs and stuff, it's already 30 days too late. And that's no harm, no wrongdoing of their own. It's because we delay it, they delay it, and then it just gets really delayed. And sometimes they publish right away, but again, we still delay what we syndicate. So I think that the best way that we stay on top of emerging threats internally is by communicating with our peers. The communications and the outreach that we have amongst ourselves is pivotal in what we do, especially in what I do.
So when we talk about like third-party risks, especially supply chain, how do you approach that, like assessing for that risk and also kind of managing that risk that might be happening?
Yes, so supply chain risk is always a great one. So whenever we do like an M&A or we do some type of acquisition or something, it's always where we have to actually take some of their tools apart and we have to disassemble them and look at what they're really doing. So it's going back to that whole SBOM requirement where we go back and we look at what's really in our infrastructure. And that gets a little bit painstaking, and that's not really a great answer, but it's still what we have to do. Because at the end of the day, we can't protect what we don't see, what we don't know is there. So if we don't take it apart, we don't do our own due diligence, this is where I have to go back to say, this is where, you don't have to be technical, but you have to have someone on your staff who is. And to actually do this whole, breakdown, disassembly, and actually analysis of what's there. And that's it just goes back to SolarWinds. And we don't want to be the next SolarWinds. We don't want to be the next headline on the news. And that's where we just have to do a due diligence. And it's painful. There's no around it. And I know someone's going to watch this video and say, well, we got the solution for that. And my whole response is going to be, prove it. I got probably 50 companies I can show you to. Can you show me how to do that? Not that's perfectly simple. Click of a button with 50 companies across the board. Can you do it in 5 minutes? The answer is going to be no. Because how do you set it up in 5 minutes across all companies? You can't. So there's a lot of people I'm sure will watch this video and be like, oh yeah, we can do that. No, you really can't. But it's great to see that you guys want to try. But there's always that factor. Again, there's some things are in an enclave, which is a securely encrypted environment, securely protected, and it's not something where it's easily accessible. So there's always fun things. There's always little gotchas. There's always little how do you say? There's always some type of condition that has to be met prior to being able to get into something. Even if we're onboarding a new vendor, we still have to audit that vendor for third-party risk. So it's like, yeah, we can do that. Like, yeah, but for us to onboard you, Yeah, you might be able to click the button and solve the problem after we've onboarded you and given you access. But in order for you to get that access and get onboarded, I promise you it's going to take a lot more than just that 5 minutes. And that's sometimes where they might not see that. It's always fun. So that's how I stay ahead of emerging threats. We have a SOC team. We have our analysts running 24/7. We have a follow us on model. So we've got people in different parts of the world that are always constantly working on it.
So you talked earlier about dollars and cents, and essentially you would want to align cybersecurity strategies with what the business understands, the dollars and cents. So how do you go into an organization and kind of build, and even for the ones you train, how do you teach them to really build up a culture of security without, on the flip side, without blocking the innovation and growth? Because I'm assuming several of these you're investing in are at least startup stage and probably looking for a seed money or something. So how do you kind of approach, hey, I'm training you a new person, here's how you can build a culture of security without getting in the way of what we actually need to accomplish in the business?
Right. That's always a tough question. As Mike Johnson would say, you don't want to be the division of no or the department of no. So that in and of itself is a tricky question. But the short answer is you have to balance what the goals and objectives are, and you have to move at the speed of the business. So it's like you can't focus every response with no. So you have to say, as Mike Johnson would say, it's like yes, but. So it's like I've actually listened to that for several years. I think he said that probably 3, 4, 5, or maybe even 5 years ago. But it's it's one of those things where you have to focus on what the business goals and objectives are, and then what risks or the business willing to take to actually accomplish those. So it's a risk-based question. So in our department, for example, I'll look at what we're trying to do, and again, that going back to the previous question, going back to the vendor that says, yeah, we can solve all of your SPOM requirements in 5 minutes by just pushing the button. And it might come to a point in time where we're in a compliance portion or we're doing some type of manual audit, where maybe we say we overlook a control or we bypass a control just to put that in place to test it. But at the same time, if we did do that, then we're going to have another team auditing the control while the control is auditing the other infrastructure. So then we're going to have to actually duplicate and layer all of our work just to make sure that we can subrogate that risk. And we do that. I'm not saying we don't. It happens. So that would be the answer to both of your questions then. Of how do we actually move at the speed of business, and how do we actually do that would be to make sure we have something that overlaps one control over another. So there's trade-offs. So it's like, okay, fine, if we have to do this and there has to be this solution here, then the answer is like, yes, but then I've got to have another department over top of them and make sure it's layered like a cake. So if there is any breach or any gaps, it's sealed and it stays contained. And that's where things get a little bit tricky, because you'll always have management or the board trying to drive towards this one direction, and then you've got to solve for it. And you can't tell them no, because if you're saying no, then you're not working with the business. And then you're being counterproductive to the business, because the business is trying to move at this speed because this is what their trajectory is for making money. So if you try to slow that down, you harm the business, and you can't harm the business because you're not being effective if you're losing money for the company. So that's a very tricky question. And in short, it's you got to move at the speed of business, but you've got to then put controls in place to mitigate the risk that you just introduced yourself.
So how do you actually continue your professional development? Like, are you getting more college degrees, certs? Are you just talking to peers, like you mentioned? Like, what do you do to kind of stay current on everything that might be going on in the world that may have an impact or potential impact on either your organization or the ones that you invest in?
What actually keeps me going personally is, I teach as a professor at a school, but in addition to that, though, I find that I do a lot of volunteer work, and I find that by mentoring and volunteering, I get some very interesting questions, and I find that actually keeps me on my toes better than just going to school myself, or actually trying to get another cert. I have plenty of certifications. I've got a wall full, but um, at the end of the day, I can't find any substitute for real hands-on experience. I know that, Ken, you have a school, I believe, and you have a lot of certificates. I've actually watched and followed your posts, and I know you talk about CEH a lot, because I see that come up on my stream often for LinkedIn. And a lot of those certificates are great. Please don't get me wrong. they give you the foundations that you need to actually gain the experience, because you need to have that fundamentals. Again, going back to what we were talking about for being a CISO, you have to understand the technical acumen in order to do the job and manage your team. If you don't know what your team's talking to you about, all you hear is, a different language. You're never going to be able to communicate effectively either with your team or with your management board. So a certificate's great in terms of getting those foundations. It gives you the ability, or college degree, but it gives you the foundations that you need to communicate. Will it get you the job per se? No, they won't all get you the job, but they will give you the foundational knowledge to gain the experience to get those jobs. So they still have a very pivotal role in what we do in society. Is that, I think, the end all be all? No, but I do believe that they are a great foundation. You have to have a foundation to stand on. Even when you build a house, you don't build a house on just dirt. You pour a foundation, you build something solid, and you build your house on top. And think of a certificate more like the foundation for your house. It's that concrete, it's that stable structure that you can then use your own real life experiences to build on.
I agree 100%. I think as a generalization of our industry, I think we put too much emphasis on certifications. I was saying you've got to have, these 400 certs to get this job. And I think what you said, Charles, nailed it. It's foundational knowledge. It's like way back in the day before all these certs came out, we would read a book or we would talk to someone that had experience in that particular thing. And we'd get that fundamental knowledge and we'd go put it on the keyboard and start typing away and figuring stuff out and clicking things and whatnot, or setting up that switch or router. So I think, and I'll give a personal example. My very first IT job, I read a book about networking, went to the interview, passed the interview because I talked enough verbiage and enough buzzwords. And then the real stuff came where I actually learned hands-on, had to do it hands-on. And the stuff I read, that was nice. But when it came to applying it, I'm like, oh, okay, now this makes sense and this and that, et cetera. So 100% agree with you, Charles, on that. I think a certification or even a college degree, it's just a baseline. It's just like if I bought a bunch of books and read them, I'm just getting that knowledge. Now I have to go apply it. We talked earlier about you came from a financial background. I can go read all the finance books in the world. If I don't, at the end of the day, go like, let's say there's a book on budgeting. If I don't actually like apply it to my personal finances, I'm not going to have success with it because it's just knowledge in my head until I actually apply it. So great point there. I want to pivot now. We've talked a lot about the role that you're in and kind of advice around that. You're involved in a conference, which unfortunately this year, while we're filming this, I'm not able to attend it this year. Hopefully Charles will invite me again next year to the beautiful location in Hawaii. But do you mind just talking about the Horizon Summit that's coming up here? I think when people watch this, it's probably just a few weeks out from when the actual conference dates are. Do you mind just talking about the Horizon Summit, giving some insight into what it's about, what kinds of things people can expect there, who's the target audience to actually attend it, and maybe also mention if there's a virtual option besides people flying to Hawaii, which realistically could be pretty expensive for most people. So is there a virtual option for the conference as well?
Yes, we actually do have a hybrid approach. So we actually are recording it live or live streaming it. So you will be able to watch it virtually if you're unable to attend in person. So far we actually catered to the global Fortune 500 folks. So it's a global summit. We span, I think, 15 different countries with the 15 biggest companies in those countries. And it's pretty amazing seeing some of the companies and countries that are coming. It's like I've never heard of some of these brands before, but it turns out that they're in the top like 100 biggest companies in the world. And I'm like, but I've never heard of this brand before. It's like even my friend is a lawyer at one of the groups that are coming, and apparently they're the biggest distributor for McDonald's and Coca-Cola. I'm like, never heard of these companies before, but they're there and they're huge. You just think that your Pepsi and your Coke and your energy drinks and everything just arrive to the store by magic, but it's the distribution companies and the other companies that are behind the scenes that actually do all the job, do all the work. So it's amazing. So our cybersecurity conference is talking with the global Fortune 500 folks about some issues that matter. Again, going back to what we were talking about previously about what we're doing and how we're doing it, and we're having those candid conversations because we're in person. We're not really restricted on what we can and can't talk about per se in person. So we'll get the opportunity to have those candid conversations. And there's a lot of great speakers. They're welcome to check out the website and look at it, horizonsummit.org or thehorizonsummit.com. So there are a lot of great opportunities. So there are also virtual passes available. So I think they're able to get those from you as well if they want to register virtually. I think all the students that are trying to get into cybersecurity should probably watch it because you're going to hear from some of the biggest and the best companies in the world talking to you about their real life solutions and their real life scenarios and problems. I know that's what I'm going for. I'm going to actually learn from my peers because I don't run a multi-trillion dollar company. Um, but I want to learn how they do it, and that's what I'm going for.
Any final advice? And this is kind of going to be a broad question. So any final advice for businesses out there that are looking to maybe build out a security program, or for people looking to get into a similar role like you, and or sort of that more entry level audience you mentioned that they're trying to get into their first cybersecurity job. So any very broad question, you can pick whatever route, or you can pick totally 180 route if you want to, but any final advice that you would have for anyone out there?
Yes. So the best advice I can give anybody is to follow their passion, enjoy what they do, because when you enjoy what you do, it's not as much work as you might think. I love what I do. I complain about it a little bit here and there, but as a CISO, I still put in 80 hours a week. But, there's no short days, there's no long days. And I'll also preface that with at at the end of the day, the only person who's going to realize that you worked long hours, and long days, long nights are your children. So it's important to also maintain a family balance in a fair balance. So again, what I do in financial services is a little bit different than most industries. So ours is a little bit more challenging. Everybody tries to find ways to get into money, but ideally, you have to follow what your goals and objectives are. Follow the path that makes the most sense to you. And if you're trying to get into cybersecurity, it's a really difficult market. I know everybody keeps talking about there's a lot of jobs, and I'll tell you from a financial perspective. I'll tell you guys a secret. Um, there might be requisitions for jobs, but it doesn't mean there's actually any money to pay you behind those requisitions, because the requisitions posted by one department, the department that generates the budget to pay the requisition is not the same. And I know I've got a phone call from a famous, aerospace company that I live next to, and they've called me literally over 50 times, the recruiting department. I'm like, I already know you guys don't have any money to pay this. You have four requisitions, or three requisitions, but you have no budget to pay it. And it was only put on their sheets for P&L purposes, because it shows when they're doing the reporting for the stocks in their industry that they're trying to expand, they're trying to hire, they're trying to do their due diligence. But in return, it's just kind of a shell, because there's no money to pay it. There's no funding behind the jobs. So please don't believe everything you see that the industry is hiring. It's going crazy. The jobs are there for show. There's not all the jobs have money behind it. So that's important to realize, important to note. That's a industry lesson to learn, because you'll follow sometimes the wrong path, thinking that you're chasing, opportunity, when in reality you're chasing, false promises and lack of a better term, snake oil. So I think that's the best thing I can say to tell people if they're trying to break into the opportunity. Try to look in getting an industry, or just focusing on cybersecurity in general.
So just tagging on to that question, is there a way for, let's say I'm a kid fresh out of college or whatever, or I'm a career changer. Is there a way for me to to look at a job posting and see some maybe hints, or look at let's say it's a public company, look at their financials and kind of get a idea of what I can publicly get to determine, like, well, maybe these are kind of phantom postings? Or is there no way for someone to kind of determine that just based on the external view?
From the external view, it's going to be really hard to tell. You can do it by looking at some of their reports that they submit to the SEC and stuff, but it's going to be difficult unless you're really trained in finance to see it. In fact, I didn't know about this aerospace one until they called me 50 times. And then I just got to the point where I called over to their hiring manager. When I called their hiring manager, the hiring manager was like, all I know is that, yes, we're hiring for these positions. Then I actually found out who was in charge of those requisitions and who that they actually named as being in charge. And then I just called them like, hey, look, you guys doing that? He's like, yeah, we're in the process of trying to get a budget for it. We don't have a budget for it, but yes, we have the requisitions. We're just trying to see what's on the market, what's available. But we don't have a budget for it yet. But we should have a budget eventually. This was going back 6 months. I'm still getting calls. I'm like, I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. And I'm like, okay, so basically, if you're looking at a job and you're getting a lot of calls or a lot of interest, my most knee-jerk response is to always call the company or call the person responsible for that requisition and then try to talk with them. If you don't get a response back from them, or if they don't tell you that it's real per se, or that they're really legitimately hiring, then I tend to think of those as fake. And I'm not saying that you should go spam every hiring manager in the world, but what I am saying is that if a hiring manager is hiring for a position, say chief engineer, or tech levels, tech specialist, XYZ company, you should be able to find out who's responsible for that requisition, who you'd be working for, who your manager or your boss should be, and you should be able to contact or email them, because most likely they're not going to be the ones that are getting the spam. It's most people direct their spam to HR. They don't direct it to the people who are actually the staff members that you're legitimately going to work for. So by focusing on the person that you're going to be working for, they're going to be able to give you the inside track of like, yes, I know HR put this out there, but we don't have any funding for it on my end over here. So my best advice there would be to focus on the people who you would actually be working for, to reach out, call or email them, and then try to ask them for the inside track. That'd be the fastest way, the easiest way to actually avoid a lot of heartbreak and frustration.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you're looking to secure your business better or build up your cybersecurity career, then check us out over at cyberlife.tv. That's CYBERLIFE.tv.